Hello traders and welcome to a new video. Happy holidays and let's dive in. So I've spent a fair amount of time actually creating what I'm about to show you guys. It's a compilation of all of the best sentiment tools that I know of. Basically, this is gauging what the crowd is thinking and what the crowd is doing. So basically what we're going to be looking at today are a bunch of different indicators that show us what are people doing, what do people think about the market. Let's begin. These are the 6 indicators we are going to be talking about. If any of them don't make sense, you can PM me, or I can also just explain them throughout this video. Binance long-short ratio. What this shows is of all of the Binance futures accounts, what percent of those accounts are net long, what percent of those accounts are net short. When this is 0.5, that means that half the accounts are long and half the accounts are short. When this is like 80% or 0.8, that means that 80% of traders are long. If you look here, typically when the ratio is under 50%, under 0.5, historically it's an amazing time to buy. When the ratio is over 0.8, almost always, it's typically right before a sell-off or a sell-off continues. If you look at the previous few times this has gone to 0.8, both times were around pretty violent sell-offs. So what I've noticed, when this ratio gets really, really high, typically it's during a downtrend with a lot of trap traders, and typically it precedes high bearish volatility. So typically what I've seen with this is when this ratio gets really, really high, expect the market to basically create a very low wick. Just about every single time that this ratio has gotten that high, you can see lots of bearish wicks did occur. So expect violence whenever this is above 80. Great indicator. I do recommend using it for sure. And when it's below 50%, it's almost always a good time to buy. Yeah, good indicator when you're looking on the daily chart. So this is the 1 year, so the past year of trading. Every chart that you're going to see is the same time span of 1 year. This might look a little bit ugly because I had to deal with kind of sizing it, and that was a little bit difficult. But this is another indicator that is free, kind of like the one before. So what we're looking at here is the historical Bitcoin crypto fear and greed index. The index itself is made up of a bunch of different factors such as volatility, social sentiment, Google Trends. It's a bunch of things really coming together. But what we want to focus on, as with most indicators, with anything with sentiment, there are really 2 main things you need to focus on. I don't care which one in this presentation you would like, or if it's even a different sentiment indicator that's not in the presentation. You need to focus on extremes and extreme changes, okay? Extremes are when ratios or indicators get to either a very high or a very low level. That should issue warning signs or should make you pay attention. The other thing you need to focus on is extreme change. So if an indicator, typically, let's say on the daily, it will fluctuate like +1, -2. Out of nowhere, it does like a -17. That extreme change should alert you. So if you're ever confused by an indicator, just focus on a shorthand, just those 2 things. Are we at an extreme value historically? Did I see a recent extreme change? Focus on that. So what we see here, if we look at just extreme value, when the crypto fear and greed index did reach a very, very high level, and I'm actually going to do this to show you guys the full thing. When it reached a very, very high level, such as 80 to 90%, or 80 to 90, pardon me, on a 0-100 scale, it's typically a very good time to sell. When this was really low, such as sub 30, it has been a really good indicator to buy. So this coupled with the long short is just a really, really good mix. However, I will say though, guys, extreme changes in this do tend to be a little bit complicated. So if you look here what happened in September, you can see the crypto fear greed index actually fell quite rapidly with a bearish fall. Then the market continued to fall. I've noticed that extreme changes tend to lead to continuation with this kind of indicator, but extreme values tend to work pretty well. I.e., what that means is basically sell when this is above 80, buy when this is below 30. But of course, that's not financial advice, but it's a good indicator to look at for gauging fear and greed. Obviously, you want to buy fear, and obviously you want to sell extreme greed. Okay, let's move on. So this one I really like because it's so easy to interpret. There's really not much to talk about with this one. This is the percent total supply on exchanges. So when this is at its current 11.2%, that means that of all Bitcoin out there, only about 11% are on exchanges. The larger the percentage there is of Bitcoin on exchanges, typically the more likely there is to be a short-term sell-off. The lower the total supply of Bitcoin is on exchanges, the less Bitcoin there is to sell. Typically that leads to bullish. If you look here in what happened in May 2021 during a very, very violent bearish move, one of the most violent we've seen recently, you can see that the percent supply on exchanges actually went up like this. That was probably happening because the market began to fall. Bitcoin began to flood to exchanges from wallets because maybe large traders were trying to sell off or close a little bit of their bags. They did that, and it just further fueled the sell-off. Another way that this did happen is you can see the increase in late June, early July. It looks like it actually increased a little bit. People were putting Bitcoin on exchanges and price fell. And then when people started to withdraw Bitcoin from exchanges, you can see the price began to rise in July. And ever since, it has been rising. Not a perfect indicator by any means. It's not as good as fear and greed and long short sentiment with extreme values. What I like about this is it shows how much Bitcoin is there able to sell. Because you can't really sell Bitcoin in a cold wallet, can you? If you have it on a Ledger Nano, hard drive, you can't really sell it. You'd have to put it somewhere like an exchange to sell it. So historically, what I like to look at with this is extreme change. The changes that I'm seeing are all bullish, basically, because with this falling, that means that more Bitcoin is going to be hodled and held on exchanges. So that looks bullish overall. Now this one's the one that I was like, okay, this is going to take some explaining. Instead of spending like 20 minutes explaining this, basically, guys, this is just going to show in the past 365 days of all Bitcoin that you and others have bought and sold, what percent net profitable are people who are investing in Bitcoin. Okay, so if this number is like crazy, like 90% that you can see on the purple axis right there, when the purple got to about like 90, 100%, that means on average, most people in the last 365 days who have bought or sold Bitcoin are enjoying a 100% return. Typically, and then, if it's like minus 13%, that means that most Bitcoin investors in the last 365 days are experiencing an average 13% loss. Typically, the way that you should look at this indicator, extreme highs are obviously pretty bearish. Extreme lows are very, very, very bullish. When we were in June and part of July, you can see that's when the market low recently happened. Most people were in deep, deep loss with Bitcoin. That's actually a very positive sign because we want to buy pain, sell euphoria, When this thing got to 120%, you can see that happened. I'm going to minimize this. When this got to 120% in February, you can see that was the Bitcoin price of about 58K. It spiked up and price just fell quickly because too many people were in profit. Basically, when this spikes and too many people are in profit, you need to watch out because that's typically a sign that the market's going to fall. And when this goes much lower, such as it did in June, and recently it did also in late September, it went negative a little bit, and now too, typically a bullish sign. So right now, this is showing that we are likely to be a little bit bullish. Although this isn't, of course, like the greatest indicator of all time. It is one that just shows us how many people are profitable. So I do recommend using this. Additionally, guys, I'm going to be posting links to everything, so you don't even have to work for this. It's just going to be a bunch of links in the description below. So you don't have to scramble oh, where can I get this indicator? No, they'll all be ready for you. Additionally, some of these are paid, like this one is a paid indicator, but most of the indicators here are free. So, funding rate. Funding rate basically shows us, it's a great sentiment indicator that shows us, are futures traders bullish or bearish about the future? What this shows us is when this is very positive, very green, very high, this value, that means that the perpetual futures market is trading well above the spot market, which means that people think that the market's going to be higher. Typically, the way that most people interpret this is when it's very low, we buy. When it's very high, we sell. So this did spike up a few times. It spiked in April, it spiked in February, and it spiked in March. You can see on those three spikes right there, where my camera used to be, each of those three spikes did coincide with a market top, especially the one in April, where the funding rate actually went to a really high level of about over 0.1 on average. If you had just sold when this was above 0.1 and just bought when this was below negative 0.1, obviously you would be enjoying a phenomenal return. The funding rate, I would say, is one of the best sentiment indicators. It's definitely top three for me. It's something that just shows you what people are thinking about in the future. And when people are thinking that the market's just going to moon, when the funding rate gets really positive, it's typically a phenomenal time to sell. And when everyone thought that Bitcoin was dead, when it hit below $30,000 in May 2021, you can see that the funding rate went low, and it was a phenomenal time to start thinking about investing in Bitcoin, because you could have gotten actually a 2x return if you had bought it at around the 30s and sold it, when the funding rate spiked again in October. Again, a little bit tougher of an indicator to use at times, but it is one that is good. And right now it's showing pretty neutral signs. I mean, if you look at the current funding rate value, it doesn't really tell you anything because it's at like 0. Open interest aggregated. So open interest is how many futures contracts there are, long and short. When this is very, very high, typically that means that there's going to be a lot of volatility, because when the value gets very high, that means that there's a lot of traders with positions on. If there's a lot of traders with leveraged positions on, carnage can ensue. When the open interest is very low, typically that means there might not be as much volatility because there aren't as many futures traders to kill, basically, and whipsaw out. Another way you can interpret this is that after a massive drop in open interest, a slow increase in open interest is typically bullish. Well, what does this mean? Well, if you look at the historical lows on this chart that you're looking at right here, if you were to look at the base of most uptrends begin like this: violent down move where open interest tanks, which it has lots of times because this is Bitcoin. And after open interest tanks, the market begins to fall a little bit, or actually begin to rise. Now, when that happens and open interest rises, typically it's quite bullish. A great example of this would be in September. You can see in September and early October, we have some pretty large falls in open interest from about 10 billion US dollars to about like 6, which is insane. When that happened, and then open interest began to rise with price increasing, after all that open interest had been taken out, that was a very bullish sign. Another thing, it just happened recently, and this does look quite bullish, to be honest with you guys, that open interest tanked. Now open interest is slowly rising again. So that is a really good thing as well. So the way that I would interpret open interest, there's a lot of ways you can do this, and I have a whole course on it. Typically, it's a volatility indicator for me, but if you want to talk about bullish and bearish, you can look for that kind of pattern of the shakeout, open interest dump, and then when open interest slowly rises with a rebuilding of an uptrend, typically leads to an uptrend. So that is something that you can pay attention to. Now for the really kind of fun indicator that I was looking forward to talking to. Oh my God, now my face looks like blue because this is so blue, green, whatever it is. Great indicator, I love this. It's actually free, and this is something you can click on right now and start to look at. What you're looking at is a very short-term chart. Everything I showed you before with this, these are all 1 year. This is actually the past, like 2 weeks, 12 days. So this is December 10 to today of filming, which is December 22nd. Green is social media sentiment. So looking at Twitter and other platforms and showing, how bullish or bearish are we? When this value gets negative, people are overwhelmingly being negative, kind of like how it was 1220. If you look 1220, the green actually turned red with a little bit if you kind of zoom in. And the highs of social media sentiment are typically a phenomenal time for us to sell in the short term. Why am I showing you this short-term indicator when I showed you all long-term? Well, whenever you're making a investment decision, even if your span is years, because you're looking at the past year, you want to time the market as just well as you can. And timing does require short-term planning and short-term analysis. And this is a great way we can try to find a great spot to buy and a great spot to sell. A great example of what had happened, look December 13th. December 13th, we actually had a spike in social media sentiment, which basically is saying that a lot of people were becoming a little bit bullish when Bitcoin was about 49,000 actually, December 13th. And then you can see price just kind of shot down. And then right when price shot down, social media sentiment tanked as well because it made people bearish. Then price rose. And then the best part of this entire chart is what happened December 20th. On December 20th, you can see that social media sentiment tanked. It was the market low the last 12 days, and not surprisingly, also the best time to buy. So this is a little handy short-term indicator that you can use if you so desire. So that's from Bits Analytics, and I think they have like a premium version where you can get much more data and much longer term. Let's go over the recap. Well, what you're looking at here is of the current values today, what do I think? So of the current indicators I showed you, I would say that long short sentiment is pretty neutral. Let's go back to that. Hopefully no one gets a seizure from that. Pretty neutral. I think that with the value being at like 0.58, 0.57%, that's pretty neutral to me. If anything, it's a little bit bullish. Fear greed is bullish because it's quite low. It's below 0.5. And when fear greed's below 0.5, or typically it's better to buy. When it's above 0.5, typically better to sell. Percent supply is really low on exchanges, which is amazing. That's a buy for me. The MVRV is showing that most people are actually losing money, which is really good, and that's typically bullish. The aggregated funding rate is just flat. It's telling me nothing. Aggregated OI looks really good. It dumped recently, showing me that a lot of longs may have been shaken up. And now it's rising a little bit, showing me that potentially, this could be the beginning of an uptrend. Also, because open interest is is pretty low, that does mean that crazy market moves in the next few days or next few weeks might not be as likely, because typically we see a lot more open interest building before we see crazy, like whipsaws all over the place. And finally, the last part, which was Bits Analytics that I showed you guys, the Bitcoin Sentiment Index. The Bitcoin Sentiment Index is showing that we're going to probably be short-term bearish because social sentiment just like rose a lot. So we might fall a little bit before going a little bit higher. But I would use that last indicator just as kind of a timing mechanism for the short term. All right, I love making this video. This was just a sentiment collection. If you guys made it through the whole 18 minutes, good job on you. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. All right, happy trading.